welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm your host, Luis Rodriguez. Thank you for being with us. On today's show, we'll be discussing the deal made by the EU and Turkey regarding the fate of the refugees. Next, we'll ask the question of what will happen with the Broncos after Peyton Manning's retirement. And finally, we'll talk about the problems facing the Runnin Rebels. Before we begin, let me introduce our panel. First, we have James Schaefer, a junior majoring in journalism and media studies. Next, we have Nikiya Berry and Jason Guzman, both who are journalists for the Rebel Report. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin with our first topic. Since the Syrian uprising, many Syrians have traveled miles to seek refuge. Many have sought refuge in Greece and Turkey. The EU has struck a deal with the Turks, basically that the EU has said they will send Syrians caught crossing their borders back to Turkey, and in exchange, Turkey will send non-Syrian refugees to Greece. Is the EU doing the right thing here? James, let's start with you.
Well, first off, we have to look at what the Turks are getting kickbacks, and what kickbacks they're getting from this framework they've offered to the EU. And right off the bat, EU leaders have said this is a naive plan, as though they are shocked by the Turks offering such a plan for the EU. The kickbacks they're getting is they're getting 75 million visa validations through the EU for Turks, and they're also hoping that the EU will reassess their 3 years ago plan to re-enter, or rather enter the EU. So from this, we're looking at from the Turk perspective of they're trying this not only for the humanitarian reasons, but also for the reasons of making sure that the Turkish opinion perspective is protected and that their entry to the EU is not promised, but relooked at. And then also that the EU is able to stymie the flow of illegal immigrations and look at it from a better, more Turkish perspective.
And why weren't the Turks accepted in the EU?
Well, that you can look back to more economic, more political reasons. If you look at what actual eligibility, that word, that the Turks have with the EU, you have to look at their actual, well, a good example would be state of livelihood. The state of life in Turkey is not what you would say would be an EU standard. Same would go with their median household income. Very small environmental factors that have just gathered up and made it so that the Turks are not eligible for the EU assessment. So hopefully, with the re-look at this framework that the Turks have offered at the EU summit, hopefully some good will come out of it.
What about you, Nikiya? What do you think about this deal?
Well, it seems like Turkey is being selfish by not really thinking about the refugees' lives, but then just thinking about their consideration into the EU and what benefits them. So the refugees are already going through a hard time in Syria. That's why they left, and they're in Greece, and so now they're being traded to go back to Turkey, and then they're just saying that we'll give you guys a non-Syrian to like balance the race out there. I think it's just, are we trading people? Like, we can't just do that.
Now, do you think that the EU is being fair?
No, I think it's just an extra step. I think everyone should just be taking a certain amount of the refugees into their country and then not trading anyone.
So, Justin, I'm going to come to you. So many have criticized the United States for not accepting more Syrians into the country. Is this not, but like the EU has been doing? Do you think that the EU is pretty much being a hypocrite since they're not really accepting Syrians?
Yeah. Yes, and obviously we're looking at a global issue with the refugee crisis. It's Turkey was obviously the land bridge to the EU, and now Turkey has leverage, and so now they've been trying to join the EU for a while. They're using this as leverage to do so, and it reeks of hypocrisy actually. So like I said, I understand. Greece is, it's getting to Greece now. That's why Greece is upset, and they're already going through their economic troubles. And I can understand there's always an economic issue when it comes to refugees and bringing refugees in. But, when do we stop looking at the economy side and looking at, the humanity side? And that's the issue that we have.
And on that humanities side, one of the things that the Turks have worked to correct is NATO's haphazard mishandlement of the illegal immigration process into Greece. I mean, one of NATO responses to the deaths of many immigrants from in the Aegean Sea was that they should offer patrols, Navy patrols in the Aegean Sea to pick up these immigrants. But the illegal immigration group, whatever you want to call it, the mafia that ends up orchestrating these illegal immigration boats, over into these Greek islands, they have offered life preservers that don't work, boats that are too old to sail, and in response, NATO has said, don't worry, we'll just have a boat come and pick you up.
Yep.
That's not a response to the deaths of the people in the Aegean Sea. So Turkey has worked to respond by saying, listen, NATO, EU, you don't have a handle on this at all. Let the Turks handle it.
Well, they're making it difficult for refugees to get to Greece on purpose.
Right.
They don't want to make it easy. And then the only people that's benefiting from this process are the smugglers. They're getting paid a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that's very true.
And speaking more to the humanity part, I read an article yesterday that a couple on a cruise, or a wealthy couple in the Mediterranean, who coming to visit and expecting to see, beautiful things and see, this refugee, the crisis, death, and spend millions of dollars with their own funds and picking up people because, again, the humanity part has to come into play.
So, in this conversation, a lot has been mentioned about the economy. So, don't quote me on this, but if I remember, so my question is, offloading all these refugees into Syria, how much of an economic, how much will this affect Turkey's economy? Because the EU has like a population of, if I remember the article, like about 27 million, and their GDP is about 17,000 or 17,000, something like that. And Turkey's population is only about 17 million or even 7 million, and their GDP is only about like 9,000. So how much of an economic effect will this happen to Turkey? So I'll go with you, Don Schaefer.
Disastrous. It will have a disastrous effect. Looking at the population that you have already described, how many ever? Nine something odd million.
Yeah.
Right. Looking at the actual amount of Syrians that are living in Turkey in these refugee camps, we get the upwards of about 1.2 million. And that should rock anyone in their chair listening to that statistic right now. That is an effect on their GDP. That is an effect on their look at it from a perspective of the way that a regular Turkish government would operate. They cannot operate with refugee camps outnumbering the communities that they serve. They cannot operate with an economy being tacked on with such a, I guess to put a good image to it, a limb that doesn't function. You have a population that isn't able to contribute to the economy, not able to contribute to the workforce, and instead is relying on the government for operations, for needs. Mind you, for good reason, but nonetheless, it is a danger to Turkish economy, and not only is it a danger, but it is a danger, not only is it a danger to their economy, but a danger to their reassessment, to their entry to the EU, even though they're trying to help the EU.
So what should be the solution to fix this crisis with the refugees?
So it should not be all pushed on to the poor countries. It should be based off of who is able to afford to take care of these refugees. And the Arab nations is a big fault in this too, because they're taking like 0 people. So that would help if more countries took these refugees in and not looked at them as migrants, as if they're just moving because they're trying to look for better opportunities. They're forced to leave, and it's our obligation as a world to take these refugees in and have a responsibility for the strong to not take advantage of the weak.
Yeah. So
the answer is simply complicated. Right. You have nations like Jordan and Lebanon that are aiding with the efforts of refugees, but until you work out this simple but complicated issue of Syria and ISIS and the Turkish to Syrian border, those are very simple issues to say out loud, but they're very, very complicated to even endeavor.
And these Syrians, they don't want to leave. They just want the war to stop. So That's the root of the problem right there.
And hopefully, as many have said, in both political parties, running for president in our country, hopefully we can have a allegiance with not just only us, but other Arab nations and even the EU to help and fix these issues, in Syria and defeating ISIS. But let's continue on with our next topic.
All right.
So the Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning has officially retired from football. What legacy will he be leaving? So Justin, let's start with you.
Well, that's a toughie. He's only been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for the last, 18 years. Honestly, I've always been a Peyton Manning fan. I haven't really, not a Denver Broncos fan, but, or a Colts fan, but I follow and I appreciate good play, good sports. And, he's been one of the best. But he's been marred by the not being able to win a Super Bowl, and he did that, for the second time, after that. And then marred by this stuff coming out now about the, I guess, alleged assault or indecency exposure.
What do you think about that? Because I was talking to somebody, and they was telling me that when Peyton wrote his book, or not Peyton, but his brother and his father, I believe, when they wrote their book, they mentioned that issue, and they were saying that it wasn't even that big of a deal.
Right,
He was,
Played
getting
down,
a massage, and that incident
Hijinks,
happened. So,
right, hijinks,
yeah, exactly, hijinks. So, is it really that big of an issue?
Honestly, the way what's been big in the news now with the sexual assaults and the violence against women, and it's in our news, and it's something we should not overlook. And that's a tough issue. Obviously, you love your players. People have you're called a fan for a reason. It's fanatic, and sometimes it blurs the lines, and it's hard to put the two away. Once you know something about a player, you know what I'm saying. It's hard to kind of separate the two, but people do it all the time.
What about you, Jason? What do you think of what do you think about the legacy he's left?
Well, I think when you look at his retirement, his legacy, you have to look at who's going to take up the mantle. And I have two words for you: touchdown Tom. Tom Brady. If you're looking at who's going to take up the legacy that he's offered, the legacy that he's made, it is definitely, undisputedly, Tom Brady. Mind you, he has a long way to go for the statistics that he needs to make up that Manning has made. Manning has the highest amount of his all-time leader of passing yards, touchdowns, game-winning drives, and fourth quarter comebacks. Tom Brady doesn't even come close to a lot of those groups, but he does have the energy for it. He does have the enthusiasm, and in some ways the rage to take up what. In this form, the gauntlet that Manning has dropped with his retirement to what MVP quarterbacks are coming up, definitely Tom Brady.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Nikiya, what do you think will happen? So my next question, what do you think will happen to the Denver Broncos once Peyton does leave? Will it be a big impact or not really?
Yes, in a different way. The attention is off of Manning now. He had his career, and it could be looked at from three different perspectives. The fan perspective, a lot more jerseys will be sold now from him. And he left at a great time. He left on a high point. He left at a good time to avoid scrutiny with any drama. And the other perspective is from the NFL's standpoint. It's just a business. So they didn't want to pay him anymore. Okay, let him go into retirement. We're going to force you basically into retirement because we don't want to pay you anymore. And we want to pay another athlete a cheaper price to come in. And from the player's point of view, from Manning, it's sad because he put all of that dedication and heart into that team, and now he's basically forced to leave. He didn't want to start over at another team. Okay, so
I was going to throw you a curveball and saying, if the issue was they fired him, quote unquote, fired him because the rent was too high, couldn't he have just gone off with another team? But I guess he just answered my other question. So
definitely ended on a high note. That was definitely the right move.
So now, Justin, I'm going to come to you. How big of a shoe does the next quarterback have to fill when they come in?
Oh, in Denver?
Broncos, yeah.
Oh, you know what? I believe Brock Osweiler just got signed somewhere else, so they're looking in for fresh new talent. And I don't think he has to do much, actually. I mean, Peyton didn't really do much this season, and whoever's coming in, they're going to rely on that defense, who was top notch. Von Miller, who just came off, one of the greatest games in the Super Bowl. He wrecked shop, and we actually have to worry about the other guys, the Cam Newtons and the Russell Westbrook. Russell Wilsons, and these guys are still, their defenses are great, and they're stepping up still, and whoever the Denver Broncos pick, they're going to have a great time because that defense is gonna hold its own.
Well, with that, we're gonna have to go to halftime and come back. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You'd do anything to take care of that spot on your lawn. So why not take care of that spot on your skin? If you're a man over 50, you're in the group most likely to develop skin cancer, including melanoma, the cancer that kills one person every hour. Check your skin for suspicious or changing spots and ask someone you trust to check areas you can't see. Early detection can put you in a better spot. Go to spotskincancer.org to find out what to look for. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Welcome back. Now something closer to home. What is going on with the Runnin Rebels? Earlier this year, Coach Dave Rice left the team. Many players are out of the season because of injuries. And now, to make matters worse, the NCAA claims Derek Jones is ineligible to play because of problems with his SAT scores. Before I begin with our panel, I had the opportunity to interview John Casanino. He was a sports anchor and reporter here in the Valley for Fox 5 and is now working for UNLV. Let's hear what he had to say.
You're talking about injuries, where you have major players being hurt. Ben Carter's out. Steven Zimmerman misses a big chunk of time. There's no players on the roster at this point. So they're playing with a new coach, no players, and then you get a player, again, kicked out, essentially, for this whole ACT score drama or ACT test drama.
So, a little confusion there. Sorry, I said ACT and it was actually his SAT, I meant ACT scores.
ACT.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on? So what do you think, James?
Well, very quickly, I agree with John. I mean, you're looking at the season altogether. We've lost Carter from injury, and what? Last season we lost DeQuan Cook, who was kicked off the team. The state of the team is always in constant fluctuation. And for me, as a rebel, a true blood rebel.
Yeah, you voted.
That's how I did. I voted. That's how dedicated I am. Thank you, C-Sun. What I have to say is the same thing. I would say if I was Rose on the Titanic, I'll never let go, Jack. If Jack was Todd Simon, I'd never let go unless Stacey Ogman came along, but I never let go.
Okay. Justin, what do you think?
Well, I think the future is good. I do like that we're increasing our exposure to the teams, to the sports. It's kind of a catch-22 here. I mean, we had such a great run back in the days with Tark, and for some reason we haven't been able to get the community around us again. And it's kind of like a catch-22. You got to be good to get the community to rally, but then good players don't want to come if the community is not supportive and we're not. So I think whoever comes in is going to have just a continued effort into just making sure that the community gets involved and and recruiting. It's all about recruiting.
So Nikiya, I'm going to come to you. So when I talked to John off camera, he was telling me that the NCAA, with this whole issue with the ACT scores, they already knew that because the reason the NCAA is taking him out is because the testing site that he took it at had some issues, that they were doing some grayish things. So if the NCAA knew back in September this was going on and let him, accepted him to play in the team, is it kind of, them being hypocrites, saying that, oh, now, you can't play because we didn't know about your ACT scores?
Oh, definitely. Perfect timing, right?
Exactly. Right?
Right when the postseason starts, they want to take him out. And I just think the timing is what makes everything suspicious.
Okay. So as many of you know, the Thomas & Mack is hosting the Mountain West Conference. The media are reporting that the tournament started yesterday, March 9th, but in fact, it actually started back in March 7th, 3 days earlier. And it was the women's sports that started. Are the women's sports not getting the same respect like the men's sports are? And is that fair? Because, this month is National Women's Month. So, Nikiya, since you are a lady here in the table, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's just a growing thing that the whole nation and world probably is dealing with. We just have to, we're learning to be more aware of women's sports and to give them more acknowledgement, and especially as they start doing, they're doing football now.
Right.
So just as we start to see them more, then we'll get more used to, we'll accept them more and pay more attention.
What about you, Justin? Why do you think that the women's sports are not getting that same respect?
It's tough. It's something that, like she said, it's not just here. It's, it's kind of everywhere. The women's sports doesn't get the same amount. I do the live stream for the women's games, and I always wonder, why we don't have more kids or more people come in and more, how to get the community more involved in the sports. It's a tough question, and I think if whoever found the answer to that question would be
genius.
I think it's the media's fault, because the media and sports channels, they don't focus or show a lot of the women's sports. If people were to actually be able to see them, then they would realize that there's a lot of action in those sports too, those games. People think that there's not, but the players and the viewers could tell you that there's a lot of action.
And you just brought up my next question to James.
Okay.
So, most women's sports do much better than the men's sports. I think it was, quote me if, don't quote me if I'm wrong.
Okay, I will if I want to.
Okay, thank you, James. But I believe last season, the women's went further than the men's basketball team, but there wasn't that big of a hoopla if it was vice versa. So why is it that the media is not focusing more on the women since they're doing much better than the men?
There's definitely a double standard there, and for that I can only speak on to say it comes to viewership count and to how devoted the audience is to the team. And going back to Mountain West has made a huge impact on UNLV. It's made a huge impact on the black lot, the white lot, the red lot. And as a paying student for parking, I have to say, even though I'm parked at McCarran, I have enjoyed it quite a lot.
Yeah, and how much of an impact does the Mountain West Conference give to UNLV, other than screwing up our parking? How much of an impact does it bring to UNLV, Justin?
Cash. It's all about cash. Everything. The NCAA tournament is the basketball tournament. The men's basketball tournament generates pretty much 90% of what NCAA makes throughout the year. It's in the billions now, I believe, with the TV agreements and stuff. And that's really what the Mountain West brings. The Mountain West brings a network. Mountain West brings CBS. Mountain West brings more national coverage and money, and that's really what it comes to.
How many teams are covered in the Mountain West Conference?
I believe it's 10 or 12. I'm not too sure on the exact number, which is sad because I'm a Rebel reporter, so I should know exactly how many teams are in the Mountain West. But UNLV deals with Mountain West, Pac-12 stuff, so it gets bogged up sometimes.
Okay. What about you, Nikiya? Why do you think the media is not
Well, it's just the media controls everything and where the our attention goes. So if there are more reporters on women's sports teams, if the ESPN or other sports channels showed women's sports or games, then that would help. Even like there was a hockey team in Canada, a women's team that won the championship, and they literally did not get a lot of media or coverage on them, but it needs to be exposed more, the women's sports.
So you guys, being in the Rebel Report, like you said, you live stream the women's
Right.
team. So this, you guys, can you talk a little bit about the Rebel Report? Because I know you guys are not yet on PBS like this show is. So for the viewers that watch us, give a little bit of advertisement of the Rebel Report, where we can find you, and what sports you guys even talk about.
Okay, so we talk about all sports. We're not biased against anything.
Even women's sports?
Yes, of course. And even the club teams at UNLV, that they don't get a lot of recognition or exposure. So any sports that has at UNLV, and we also live in Las Vegas, so we're a growing sports city where a lot of events are happening here, especially UFC.
Right.
So we're reporting on anything else too in Vegas.
And where can we find you?
So our Instagram is rebelreport_UNLV, and we also have a Facebook page, Rebel Report, and you can watch us on YouTube. Every week we have a new episode, and that is Rebel Report UNLV is the channel on YouTube. And look out for us on PBS. We'll be there soon.
All right, that's good to know. Well, with that, that's all the time that we have. I just want to thank our panelists for coming in. Please follow us on Facebook at UNLV Scramble and on our Twitter page at UNLV The Scramble. Also, email us your opinions at unlvscramble@gmail.com. For further discussions, we want to hear from you. Answer our weekly question. Who do you think will win the Mountain West Conference? Let us know. Thank you for watching. See you next time.